pod bay doors, please, Hal.
The Book of Boba Fett is open. Excuse me. The Book of the Mandalorian is open. Welcome once again. I am your host, Jerry Dean Roberts of ArmchairCinema.com and also ArmchairOscars.com. Seated here with a man who would be happy to bring you in warm or cold. It's up to you. The critic, dare I say legend, from TalkMovieMe.com, Mr. Doug Haller. How the heck are you today, sir?
That's actually what I was going to say. You stepped on my line. I can bring you in warm. I can bring you in cold.
Isn't it great how he says that as if he said that 1,000 times before? And if there's a sigh underneath it, it's like, I can bring you in warm, I can bring you in cold.
Right. He's just tired. He's just tired.
It's a very Clint Eastwood way of doing it, you know.
Oh, very much so. Yes. Yeah. Yes. And Mando is Din Djarin is as much influenced by Lone Wolf and Cub as he is Leone westerns. Italian westerns. And,
Samurai pictures, Leone westerns, the Lone Warrior, the Lone Wolf. You know, just out doing the job.
Yeah.
In the wasteland.
And doing a heck of a job. So this episode focuses entirely.
Tamura Morrison is credited for this.
Right.
Top build in this.
This is the first time I've ever seen a show with the character's name in the title where one episode the character in the title does not appear.
Except in the recap.
But that's not really part of the episode.
But still.
Like
this episode
I think this was a miscalculation. I
so?
loved the episode. I loved every second of it. And it reminded me what I could be watching. And all it made me want Mandalorian Season 3.
Yeah.
And not the end of the Book of Boba Fett.
Well, I mentioned this on Facebook the other day. I said, I like the Book of Boba Fett for what it is, but I'm having a very hard time getting my feet in it because the flashbacks are a lot of tell me something I don't know, and the forward story is really just building something very slowly, but you're not 100% exactly where it's going. Right. And it's not as compelling because he's basically trying to build an environment. He's not trying to make any kind of headway as far as the journey.
The trouble I've been having with the Book of Boba Fett, and again, I quite like it.
I do too.
I like the flashbacks. I like how much character work that does for him. But the contemporary, the story at the time, the forward story, it seems very thin, so they're padding a lot of it.
Right.
And because what they have, if they did all of the episodes of just him and Fennec Shand going to the places, getting the tributes, talking to the twins, doing all that, it probably would amount to about one episode.
With the forward story, the present story of the Book of Boba Fett is basically the flashbacks of The Godfather Part 2.
Yeah.
It's Vito Corleone trying to build a peaceful environment of arrangement and alliances and friendships in a landscape that is built on animalistic greed and violence.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what this series, the present story in this is. The problem is it's building very, 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 very slowly.
Right. And like I get the want to show how he got to be where he was at that time. And I have no problem with that being I would have no problem if that had been the show. And it wound up and it ended where we see him get his armor back
Mm-hmm.
from Mando. And then that could have been season 1.
Mm-hmm.
Season 2 could have been him clawing his way to the top of the Tatooine criminal in the galactic criminal empire world.
I think
So
the miscalculation is that we are waiting for Boba Fett to stretch a little bit of muscle in this environment, and he's not doing that.
yeah, he's I respect the fact that they're doing it in a way that he's conscious of what violence could mean coming from him.
Mm-hmm.
So he's using it very sparingly and very controlled.
Right.
So to make when it happens all the more upsetting,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because if you have a crime boss who's usually will just talk to you,
Yeah.
but eventually there's violence, that violence is going to be explosive.
Right.
So I like that they're building up that kind of a mentality, a very patient man, because a bounty hunter has to be patient. 95% of bounty hunting is waiting.
It just doesn't make for a compelling story in the Star Wars
Right,
universe.
right. If
Because the last thing
there's
that the audience wants to see is a person wait.
well, and there's a way to do this A story well
Mhm.
and really full bodied. It just feels like they're afraid to.
Mhm.
Um, and then we get to episode 5, which is basically the Mandalorian season 3, episode 1.
Mhm.
Um, and it's a better episode than all the other 4 put together of the Book of Boba Fett
Because
that we've seen.
because we're on the journey with him. What I love about this is it's catching up with what he's been doing.
Right, we get to see what he's been doing after Luke took Grogu.
I found out the title of this before I saw it,
Mm,
so it kind of spoiled the opening,
yeah.
which is him. You just see the silhouette, and you think it's Boba Fett, and he steps through, and surprise, surprise, it's Mando. What I love about it is it reminded me of like an ultra violent video game
Mm-hmm.
where he steps into this very dirty butcher shop,
Mm-hmm.
and you just know that eventually there's going to be cleavers and knives and all kinds of stuff just swinging around, and they're going to be body parts chopped off,
Right.
and it's just he walks up to that table and starts talking to what's it, Joan Baez. He starts talking to this guy who looks like the furry guy in The Shining. The
Actually,
bear.
you know who he looked like to me? He looked like a short-snouted dog version of Gary Cole,
Yeah.
and he is a Clatoonian.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. This is more violent than I've probably ever seen in Star Wars because there's a
Well,
lot of chopping.
Mando. The first 2 seasons were really, really, really more violent than we'd seen.
But this scene,
Oh man, he just cuts the guy. Yeah, he's using the dark saber in his hunting.
he doesn't have his carbon freezing chamber anymore from the Razor Crest, so he just collects his head.
Yeah.
Just he just collects the guy's head. It's
Well, the droid port got hollowed out, so that's like probably his head stacking chamber.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And I love the fact that he has to get around using public transport.
yeah.
It's
And he has to check his weapons, and it takes 45 minutes.
yeah, that's an old joke.
Yeah, it is.
That's an
It is.
old joke.
I've seen it 1,000
Care-
times, and I've laughed at it 1,000
like, careful
times.
that joke, son. It's an antique.
Yeah.
Because the funny thing is, he's not using any of them.
Right.
He's not using. He's got the dark saber, and I like the fact that he doesn't really know how to use it.
He does not.
And this whole thing with Pele, which I love this character, Amy Sedaris is so great. Um,
She's just a lot of fun.
it slips into a montage of them building a car.
Yeah. And at the end of it, you get a ridiculously souped up N1 Naboo starfighter.
The only thing it needed was the only thing missing from this little scene was it needed to be played under uh, "Vehicle" by the Ides of March or something like that, some old rock and roll song.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I just love the way this plays out because he's like, I thought I thought you were showing me a Razor Crest. No, I'm giving you a replacement for a Razor Crest.
Right, right, right. And it's fine, and it's an awesome ship, and it's
Mm.
really fast. And he has a lot of fun. I love when he gets done test driving it, and he comes in. She goes, "How was it?" And he goes, "Wizard."
Yeah.
There are so many episode 1 callbacks in this episode that when he's going in Beggar's Canyon,
Yeah.
you actually
Yeah.
see that one uh, part of the pod race
Hmm.
course with the service ramp.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's actually you're coming in the opposite direction with Mando,
Hmm.
but that's that same area.
Yeah.
You know, 30 years later.
And I love the fact that they've taken out the droid. She's foregone the astromech because he has to have a cockpit space because he's planning to bring Grogu back.
Well, he wants to go see Grogu.
Yeah.
He wants to check up on him and see how he's doing.
Okay, wait a minute. Now, is the fighter building scene before or after the armory? I think that's after the armory, right?
It's after the armory because the opening is he takes the head to who paid him for it, but he burned himself on the dark saber.
Not himself, yeah.
Really, really jacks his leg up,
Mhm.
and
And
he doesn't have a speeder bike, so he has
here's
to
the
walk.
funny thing: the whole time that he's talking to her, I'm sitting there thinking, this helmet thing is going to come up. Because she asks him, "Have you ever removed your helmet?" And I'm thinking, this is going to come up, and he has to answer it.
Mm-hmm.
Then you are
Well,
not.
I think because now he has to go to Mandalore
Yeah,
and bathe in the caves.
but they don't exist.
I'm sure they're still there.
Well, she says, under the living waters, under the mines on Mandalore,
Mm-hmm.
and he says they don't exist anymore, and she says this is the way. And I thought it was kind of her saying that's kind of your problem.
Well, yeah, it's that, or because yeah, the mines were destroyed, but you can still get
Bathe in
into.
the
Yeah, so
living
I'm
waters.
sure. I think that there are a lot of correct assumptions about what Mandalore looks like, and some incorrect assumptions about what Mandalore looks like and
Yeah.
is. Now we do see the bombing campaign,
Oh, I love the flashback. Yeah, yeah.
and
Now, when was that?
that was the Night of 1,000 Tears or whatever it was. That was the Empire's full out.
That was after Order 66.
Oh, long after. It was
Okay.
that was after. Remember in Rebels when Sabine gave the Darksaber to Bo-Katan.
Mm.
Um, and she tried to lead. That's when the Empire came back and basically eradicated the Mandalorian
Okay. Okay.
people, and the the Death Watch, or the Children of the Watch, were up on Concordia Dawn, which is a moon of Mandalore. Uh, they had been exiled up there a long time ago because they were extremists, and they survived because the Empire didn't go after Concord Dawn.
Right.
Um, so the people who were off world and everything, everybody got out who got out, and we get to see the destruction of one of their domed cities,
Mm.
which was really painful, especially if it's the capital city, because you got to see all of that during Ahsoka's battle with Darth Maul in season 7 of the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Uh, I
Wh-
think I think her saying that is leading him to go join Bo-Katan.
Where I'm a little bit fuzzy is that in season 2, I sensed that he understands where Bo-Katan and that faction are. Because anybody that was not a child of the Watch, he's prepared to kill. He's prepared to.
Mm-hmm.
And I sensed that that after his association with Bo-Katan and her people, that he was kind of accepting that there are other Mandalorians who don't follow the same dogma that he does.
Right. It's the same. It's the same thing as his relaxing around droids, and more after what was it, IG-11
Mhm.
uh, did what he did. Uh,
So I'm
the end of
asking. So
season
I'm
one.
wondering. So I'm wondering. So where is his head at this point? Because he's still a child of the Watch. Because you can tell that by the reaction he has to the fact that she dismisses him and turns her back on him
Mm-hmm.
and says, "You are no longer a Mandalorian. You are a Mandalorian no more." And so apparently he's still sticking to this dogma,
Yeah.
even though he understands that others have not and have
Well,
are.
I think the reason he would stick to it is because of what she tells him, which is basically they strayed from the way,
Mhm,
and that's what led our people to ruin.
mhm.
So I think he's still basically in the camp of, his indoctrination and everything.
And it's all
But
he's ever known.
right, but I don't think he's going to be violent towards them, specifically because they helped him rescue Grogu.
Mhm.
Um, Now, I think it'll be interesting. She hollowed out the droid port because she's like, "Well, I know with your history with droids that you probably wouldn't want one anyway, so
Right.
I didn't bother with it." So, uh, I just want to know. I mean, the Razor Crest. He lived on the Razor
It
Crest.
was his apartment.
Yeah, you can't live on an
Mm-mm.
N1 starfighter.
That's that's what I said the other night. I was like, okay, it was not only his ship, but it was his home.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's why he was so upset with this. It's like, okay, I can't do my business with this. I can't build, I can't. This is essentially his home, his ship, his workshop, everything. And this is not that. It gets him from point A to point B, but it's not the Razor Crest.
right.
You
It's
know,
not a freighter that you can live on like the Millennium Falcon or the Razor Crest,
the
or
Slave One.
or yeah. And so it's going to serve as a good means of transportation,
Mm.
especially. But like, if he actually does bring somebody back alive, where are they gonna go?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe in the port. Maybe that's like a prison cell kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, but he can't have too many bounties at one
No.
time,
Mm-mm.
because the back seat's only going to hold so many heads.
So he just has to collect heads.
I guess.
You
Um,
know,
hey,
8 heads in a duffel bag.
which
And
should have been a much better movie than it was.
well, and I also love this running gag that he keeps getting profiled. He keeps running afoul of the New Republic. The cops.
Yeah, it's just traffic stops. He's like always getting pulled over.
Got him on a D. Got him on a DWM driving while Mando. You
Yeah.
know.
Um, but this one, um, this episode was so strong.
It was, and I forgot about the Book of Boba Fett.
That's
It's
that, and see, that's what I mean by I think it's a miscalculation,
Mhm.
because people were already kind of bored with it,
Mhm.
and you've just reminded them that there is something infinitely better around the corner that you just teased us with. It's like, why isn't the Book of Boba Fett episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4 as good as episode 5 when
Mhm.
it's all being done by the same people?
Yeah.
Where's why is one working and why and one isn't? And you shouldn't. It's like when you're watching a bad movie, and in that bad movie they reference a good movie,
Mhm.
and you're like, you
Yeah.
shouldn't remind us what we could be watching.
Or there's a walk on by a character who's infinitely more interesting from another movie, and they just leave. And you're
Yeah,
just sitting there going, I want to go with them.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. Um,
what I would have done, what would have been really interesting is, finish out the Book of Boba Fett, and then just drop this episode like in July, and don't tell anybody. And all of a sudden, the Return of the Mandalorian just pops up, and they don't tell you that, and it just happens. They did that with a Rick and Morty episode. It's like all of a sudden, just in April, a new episode just dropped, and it was never advertised. And I thought that would have been a really cool kind of thing. But
I like
honestly,
that. I like that Mando's gonna help.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and
he's part of it.
it's not surprising that he's in. You
Mm-hmm.
know, um, I just this episode was just so much stronger because it didn't focus on what the story had been up until that point.
It's a journey. It's
Yeah,
him getting stuff done.
right. But my yeah my complaint about this is that it should have been Mandalorian season 3 episode 1,
Right,
not Book of Boba Fett season 1 episode 5.
right.
Um, other than that, I have no problem with the episode whatsoever.
Well, the thing is, you and I have our feet and our brains so tightly wrapped up in the Star Wars universe
Mm-hmm.
and who the characters are, what the situations are, what the timeline is, and who the minor ancillary characters are.
Oh yeah.
So our minds are a little more affixed to a show like the Book of Boba Fett. If you are not as interested in Star Wars and you're
Mm-hmm.
just kind of coming to this, as I do to the MCU, I'm just kind of coming to it. Um, it's not going to be as compelling. That's the problem with that
Right.
show. It's not as compelling.
Mm-hmm.
But I have 40 plus years of history
Mm-hmm.
going into that show. So it's a little more compelling to me than it would be to somebody who's just very casual about it.
Right.
That's why I hear from people who don't see Star Wars, don't watch Star Wars as strongly as I do, or don't know the characters, are having an extremely difficult time getting into this show.
Hmm.
But they liked the Mandalorian, because the Mandalorian, while tightly wound in the Star Wars universe,
It's still world building.
it's still world building. It's building its own thing. It's not as tightly wrapped into the Star Wars lore as the Book of Boba Fett.
Right.
So when he goes in the last episode, when he goes to the Sarlacc pit and they're turning the ship upside down and he's looking down into its gullet to find his armor, that carries with it all of that history.
Mm-hmm.
That if you're just casually coming into it and you're like, okay, we know it's not in there, so what's the point?
Yeah.
You know? But having built watching him build this criminal empire, it's a good show. It's just not as interesting as watching Mando build a relationship with Grogu.
Yeah. That was my main problem with the fifth episode. Now we're recording this on a day where I have an advantage
Mm-hmm.
because I have seen chapter 6
Right, and I have not.
and you have not. So I am not saying shit about shit, but
I can see you struggling. I can see you struggling. I was not, because my wife and I we're such Star Wars fans. You should see our living room. I mean, my God.
My wife understands that if it's Star Wars and I'm the only one available to watch it first, I'll watch it by myself 1st.
Mm-hmm.
That she just knows that. There's no.
I love it when I tell people, it's like, my wife is as much of a Star Wars fan as I am, maybe even more. And people who've never met her before will tell you, oh, well, she just tells you that. I'm like, no, you don't understand. The love is real, okay?
Yeah.
She is as passionate about this as I am.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way, this is the reason that I have not seen it yet,
Right.
is that I would not dare to watch an episode of this show for the first time without her there with me.
Mm-hmm.
And
just as a personal, you want her to be with you.
I do.
No.
Let me tell you something.
As me saying about the episode, yes, you do definitely want to see it.
Oh, let me tell you, because the last episode of The Mandalorian Season 2, that's when you want somebody with you. And I was just sitting there, we had tears in our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Because all that history just kind of lands on you, and it's so emotional. It's such an emotional climax, that episode, that you don't even really know where the show is going. For the last year, I have not had a real idea of where The Mandalorian could possibly go in Season 3.
Yeah.
Because it's such a firm ending.
Mm-hmm.
Here I have a basic idea, but not really. I have kind of an idea where they're taking it, but it could still go anywhere. Anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a great episode of The Mandalorian.
It was. Probably not the wisest episode to put.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. If the show doesn't come alive until you have an entirely different show's episode, and that's when the show comes alive, then your show's kind of limping a little bit. And again, I like it. I
do too.
I had minor quibbles with it until they ran that episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt all I wanted was more Mando and not more Book of Boba Fett.
Book of Boba Fett feels like one of the books. It feels like one of the lesser books. It's like it's a series that's building, but it's building.
I think that the last two episodes that we'll be going into,
I
episodes 7 and 8, uh, I
think there's
I
only
think
7.
I think there's 8,
Okay,
but
I thought
maybe
there
not.
was there's
Well,
6 and 7. I think.
I'm not sure, but
Okay.
the last episode or the last two episodes, whether there's 7 or 8, uh, I think a lot of stuff is going to go down.
Yeah.
Probably too much.
Hmm.
It's like you'll. I'm pretty sure that we're going to be sitting there in these last couple episodes of the Book of Boba Fett, going, this literally could have been the entire season.
Yeah.
I think the last episode or two would be could have been the whole thing. I'm
I
sure that that's
could
how it's
I
going to
could
be.
end up eating my words. I don't know. Because the Book of Boba Fett could be building to something great. And it could be the slow pacing of it could be worth it in the end. I don't know, but
Yeah,
anyway,
we'll
that's
we'll
all I
see.
got.
We'll see. Yeah, that's all I have too. You can find all of our back episodes and our previous Book of Boba Fett mini episodes at podbaydorspodcast.wordpress.com. You can find us on Twitter at pod_bay. Copy and paste that over into Patreon, where we have episodes there, patrons only episodes. You can listen to us on iTunes and YouTube. Hit the like, subscribe, and notifications buttons there so you know when we're doing what. We thank you so very much for listening, and the Book of Boba Fett is now closed.
The mission has been completed.